Mr. President, the end of a presidential administration is often a time for taking stock. In the coming months, pundits and reporters will spend a lot of time discussing President Obama's legacy. Perhaps the real measure of the president's legacy, I would argue, Mr. President, is how the American people are feeling at the end of his administration. And Mr. President, Americans aren't feeling too good. After 8 years of the Obama economy and President Obama's foreign policy, 2/3 of Americans think our nation is on the wrong track. More than half think we're less safe than we were before September 11th. And 67% rate our economy as not so good or poor. 2/3 of Americans. Well, Mr. President, it's disappointing, but it's not surprising. On the foreign policy front, here's where we stand after 8 years of the Obama administration. Terrorism is spreading. The Middle East is more hostile and dangerous. Iran is counting pallets of ransom money and in a better position to develop a nuclear weapon. North Korea is defiantly testing nuclear weapons. Russia is more aggressive. China is more aggressive. And I could go on and on. On the domestic front, 8 years of the Obama economy have left American families struggling. Now, while the recession technically ended 7 years ago, our economy has never really rebounded. Recoveries are usually a period of robust growth. 3 to 4% or more is common in a recovery. The Obama recovery, however, has averaged a tepid 2.1% growth. In fact, the Obama recovery is the worst recovery in 60 years. And things are actually going downhill. During the first half of 2016, the economy grew at a rate of less than 1%. Mr. President, historically, sailors referred to the area around the equator where their ships could become trapped for weeks as the doldrums. Well, that's pretty much where our economy is now. It's in the doldrums. Stuck, unmoving. Our economy's barely grown at all this year, and the long-term forecast is bleak. In fact, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office is estimating that our economy will grow at less than 2% for the next 10 years. Well, what do those numbers mean, Mr. President? Sluggish economic growth means fewer jobs. It means lower incomes. It means fewer opportunities. We can see the effect of the sluggish Obama economy in job creation and unemployment numbers. While the unemployment rate has decreased from its recession-level highs, part of that has been driven by individuals dropping out of the workforce. The challenges of finding a job in the Obama economy has led many individuals to simply give up looking for work altogether. Millions have dropped out of the workforce, and we now have a labor force participation rate that is near a 30-year low. If the labor force participation rate were the same today as it was when President Obama took office, the current unemployment rate would be 9.1%. Let me repeat that, Mr. President, because I think it's important when we talk about all these different percentages, particularly with regard to unemployment. But if the labor force participation rate were the same today as it was when President Obama took office, the current unemployment rate would be 9.1%. That's how many people have completely dropped out of the labor force. That's how many people are no longer participating in our economy. On the job creation front, the Obama recovery has again lagged far behind other recoveries. So far this year, job creation has averaged just 182,000 jobs per month, far below where it should be in a strong economy. For the Obama recovery to match the job creation of other post-1960 recoveries, job creation would have to soar to 1.37 million jobs a month for the rest of the Obama presidency, or more than 7 times the number of jobs that we're currently adding. Mr. President, with numbers like these, it's no surprise that 2/3 of the American people rate the Obama economy as not so good or poor. Americans are tired. For the past 8 years, good jobs and opportunities have been few and far between, and that's not all Americans have had to contend with. They've also had to contend with the steep cost of health care. The President's health care law was supposed to make health care more affordable. We were told premiums for families would drop. We were told Americans would have the freedom to keep their doctor and choose affordable plans that fit their needs. Well, the reality has been pretty much the opposite. To illustrate, I'd like to just read a brief article that appeared a few days ago on CNN Money. The title of the article is, and I quote, "Healthcare Costs Rise by Most in 32 Years." And here's what the article had to say. Healthcare costs rose sharply in August. Prices for medicine, doctor appointments, and health insurance rose the most last month since 1984. The price increases come amid a broader debate about climbing health care costs and high premiums for Obamacare coverage. A recent report by Kaiser Employer Health Benefits forecasts that the average family health care plan will cost $18,142, up 3.4% from 2015. That's faster than wage growth in America. Going on in this article, medical care costs together rose 1% just in August from July, according to the Consumer Price Index, a report on price inflation from the U.S. Labor Department. Premiums on the Obamacare exchanges, it went on to say, are expected to rise by double digits this year. Some health insurers, such as Aetna, have recently announced that they would pull out of the Obamacare exchanges, saying Obamacare patients have turned out to be sicker and costlier than expected. Overall, workers are paying more for deductibles. Over half of U.S. workers with single coverage health insurance plans pay a deductible of $1,000 or more, up from 31% of workers in 2011. And the health care price increases come as inflation overall continues to be low. Consumer prices altogether rose 1.1% in August compared to a year ago. Now, all those statistics, Mr. President, come from that CNN Money piece. So let's just recap what they were describing. Prices for medicine, doctors, and health insurance are way up. The price of the average family health plan is growing faster than wages. Obamacare premiums are soaring. Individuals are facing double-digit premium increases. Deductibles are up. Insurers are pulling out of the health care exchanges, reducing Americans' choices. And health care costs are growing faster than inflation. In other words, they're taking up an even greater share of Americans' budgets. That's where we are after 6+ years of the affordable, quote, Affordable Care Act. Well, Mr. President, I've said before that if we wanted to coin a phrase to describe the Obama presidency, it might be the presidency of diminished expectations. It's the presidency in which Americans started to doubt the cornerstone of the American dream, that their children will have a better life than they do. It's the presidency in which we were asked to start looking at weak economic growth as somehow being the new normal. And it's the presidency in which we were asked to look at a future of soaring costs and limited choices as the new standard for health care. But, Mr. President, we don't need to resign ourselves to these diminished expectations. After all, the weakness of the Obama recovery is not a chance or a coincidence. It's the natural consequence of the president's policies. Instead of freeing up our economy to grow, the president has weighted it down with tax hikes, spending increases, and burdensome regulations. Over the past 8 years, the Obama administration has enacted more than 600 new major regulations totaling $743 billion, or, to put it in perspective, $2,300 per American. While some government regulations are necessary, every administration has to remember that regulations have consequences. The more resources individuals and businesses spend complying with government regulations, the less they have available to focus on the growth and innovation that drive our economy and create new opportunities for American workers. Unfortunately, the Obama administration has chosen to prioritize burdensome government regulations instead of freeing up individuals and businesses to innovate. But we don't have to continue that way. We can repeal burdensome regulations. We can stop overspending. We can reform our tax code to lift the burden on job creators and on families. The weak economic growth of the past 8 years does not have to be the new normal. Americans don't have to resign themselves to a future of crippling health care bills either. Obamacare had good intentions, but it's turned out to be a disaster. And if we repeal this failed law, we can start over and pass real health care reform, the kind that will actually drive down costs and provide increased access to care. Mr. President, Republicans are excited to work with a new president to move beyond the economic failures of the past 8 years. We have ideas to grow our economy, promote job growth, and increase opportunities for American families. Hard-working Americans deserve more than the diminished expectations of the Obama presidency. And Republicans firmly believe that a better future is possible. We're ready to get to work to get there. Mr. President, before I close, I want to address the bombing and attempted bombings in New York and New Jersey this weekend, as well as a knife attack at a shopping mall in Minnesota. My prayers are with the 29 victims in Manhattan, the 10 victims in St. Cloud, and the 2 wounded officers in New Jersey. My prayers are also with the families of the injured and the communities whose sense of security has been rattled. I'm grateful to local, state, and federal law enforcement personnel for their efforts to apprehend the suspect and, more importantly, prevent further injury or even death. I'm also grateful for the off-duty officer who stopped the assailant in St. Cloud. In these times of heightened threats, the service of our law enforcement officers is critical. The investigations into all of these attacks are ongoing, but they're being viewed as potential acts of terrorism. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack in Minnesota. And investigators are seeking definitive connections, such as a declaration on social media, as we saw in the San Bernardino shooting. I'm hopeful that our intelligence communities can quickly piece together the motives and possible terror links of these attacks. Doing so may lead to intelligence that could prevent future attacks and provide insight on how to better counter terror networks and prevent domestic recruitment. This weekend's attacks underscore just how high the stakes really are. The threat of terrorism continues to grow, fueled by instability in the Middle East, instability that's been fueled by the absence of U.S. leadership. Part of the reason we're facing ISIS today is because the President chose to prematurely withdraw our troops from Iraq. This left a gaping hole in Iraq's security, and ISIS quickly took advantage. And despite the trail of bloodshed that ISIS has left in its wake, the Obama administration continues to downplay the threat this organization poses. Unfortunately, Mr. President, the consequences of downplaying this threat could haunt us for generations to come. Senate Republicans will continue to do what we can in Congress to restore America's leadership and to strengthen our country's security. We will continue pushing for the resources our military needs to defeat ISIS abroad. We will continue pursuing policies that strengthen our borders so we know who is coming in and out of our country. And we will continue supporting policies that give our intelligence and security agencies the tools that they need to protect our homeland. Mr. President, the committee I chair, the Commerce Committee, is looking at legislation right now to strengthen security on our nation's highways and railways. In addition to the airport security package we enacted earlier this year as part of the FAA bill, this bill will help keep families safe as they travel around our country. I'm hopeful the Senate will take up this legislation in the near future. Finally, Mr. President, I look forward to working with my colleagues to advance essential defense legislation like the National Defense Authorization Act and defense appropriations, which will help undo the foreign policy failures of the Obama administration. For too long, Senate Democrats have put politics ahead of funding our military. Democrats have filibustered the defense appropriations bill no fewer than 6 times during this Congress alone. I'm hopeful we'll soon be able to put politics aside and fund our men and women in uniform. They serve in harm's way every day. The least we can do is give them the resources that they need to carry out their jobs. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I would suggest the absence of a quorum, but it looks like we have another speaker.